Welcome to Awakening and Relating.
I'm Kayla.
And I'm Brad.
Join us as we unpack deep awakenings, conscious relating, and further awakening through intimacy. So we're talking about avoidance. Avoidance of sitting with yourself, being with yourself, feeling emotions, actually feeling what it's like to experience in the body or feeling your own experience.
Yeah. Avoidance. We're talking about avoidance today. Avoidance could also be categorized or classified as resistance, right?
Running
from what is, right? A great friend of mine gave me a t-shirt that says unconditional love and radical acceptance. Ram Dass also talks about that in a roundabout way in a lot of his lectures, because avoiding what is here now, right? Resisting what is here now is what gets us caught in this. I mean, it's essentially an illusion, right? You're dreaming of something off in a future, or you're wishing for something that was in a past to be here now, and it's not here now. Although you can never be outside of now. Your mind can wander in and out of the past, and it can resist what's here now, or it can avoid what's here now by wishing for something that's not. So,
and why do we do that?
Well, I mean, I think we do it naturally, right? The ego structure itself, the nature of the mind is to be busy. It's interesting to me that even the ego structure that's inside this form still feels real. The mind still wanders and goes off into storyland.
Which is illusion.
It's totally illusion.
Yeah.
And what it's doing is resisting being here now, right? Because it doesn't have a way to be fully present. The mind doesn't work that way. But we get lost in the mind and tell ourselves, we believe the stories that it gives us. And in that, we avoid what's here currently. One of the ones I still find fairly difficult, I don't want to say difficult, but like an acute pain, like something that, smash your finger in a door, hit it with a hammer, something that's, lights you up. That's a lot of pain in the body. It will almost immediately put me into, why did that happen? But it's the more you cultivate awareness and the more you become aware of being aware, the faster you can let that stuff go and just recognize, okay, this is what we're doing. This is my now, right? And it may be painful in the body, but can I fully accept this, right? Can I experience it fully without avoiding the pain, right? Without running from it? Because whatever the universe is doing, consciousness, God, awareness, whatever you label it as, it is experiencing through form. And it's our tendency through the ego structure to avoid what we don't like because we have preferences, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have preferences. I do like this, I don't like that. Therefore, we will avoid things that are uncomfortable and we will seek out pleasurable things.
And then it's like we think that it's going away in the avoidance, but it's really just attaching more to us. We're attaching more to it in the avoidance rather than just seeing, feeling, letting go. Yeah,
it's a roundabout way of clinging to your pain, right? Like clinging to your suffering, right? By resisting it completely, by saying, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this. You're
making it true at the same time.
Right, you're essentially reinforcing the thing that you don't want. So if you can radically accept what is happening, where you are. And because first of all, it's undeniable. Wherever you are right now, whatever that means for you, whether you're driving down the highway, getting a flat tire, you're in a business meeting, hopefully you're not if you're listening to this, but wherever you are in life, like some people don't want to be there, but you're there and it is undeniable that you are there. So if you can accept it and not avoid what is unfolding, you can set yourself free. right? And that freedom is where the beauty lies, right? Because it's the suffering comes through the mind, right? Suffering's not for the body. Pain is for the body. It is, you feel it though, you know, just like you feel suffering, but suffering occurs in the mind. And if you can find a way, because for a lot
of it only manifests in the body because we're not feeling it energetically and letting it go energetically, then it starts to manifest in the body.
Certainly it'll manifest as sickness, disease, like pain, chronic suffering, pain, because there's this tendency to clench. You know, one of the tricks that I use that's really effective is to notice where you're like tight, right? Or what makes you hold your breath. Like, and you'll notice this. I get it when I'm driving sometimes. I'll just be driving down the highway, and I don't know if it's that cars are getting too close or situations are getting a little hairy, but all of a sudden I'll recognize that I'm holding my breath. And I'm like, why am I doing that? You know, so deep breath. This is what's happening, right? Don't judge it. But yeah, avoidance it's kind of a trap, if you will. Just like so many other things of the ego structure are, they set us up for, I don't want to say failure because that's not the right word. Like, your unfolding, the way your manifestation is expressing is correct. But it will feel better if you can accept where you are. And for some people, it gets really challenging because where you are currently might be a physically abusive situation, a very traumatic situation, something that's physically debilitating. I met a gentleman once in a sacrament ceremony space, and he asked me what is the nature of pain, and we had a fairly deep conversation about it. And I didn't have a direct answer, but I asked him if he fully leans into it, what is his experience? And he said he would, because he had some kind of accident or something, and it was chronic pain in the body. He said he would go to the gym and he would get on a bike and he would just pedal and pedal. And he said the pain would get excruciating and he would continue to pedal and continue to pedal. And at a certain point, he would just recognize that this is what is, and I'm pedaling anyway. And he's like, and it would all go away. And he's like, he told me it wasn't like being numb. It was just, everything felt fine. Everything felt fine. I personally have not experienced a scenario where I'm like, this is the worst pain I've felt. Power through it. I haven't, but I have met people.
No.
And there does seem to be a way to let go. Ramana Maharshi had surgery on his arm while he was holding court one day, giving, his devotees a talk. And he apparently didn't wince. I mean, he didn't die that long ago. There's written record about this guy all over the place. And he apparently didn't wince, didn't shy away. There is I've certainly not experienced this level, but there are spaces in which you can transcend the body completely and the pain of the body and all of the goings on of the body, just like you can transcend the mind, right? And in that, you experience freedom. Generally, you experience bliss if you have that level of letting go. And that bliss may last a certain period of time, and it's likely to fade. For most of us, it will, but this is another area where avoidance comes big into play if you're walking the spiritual walk, so to speak, is that if you do experience at any level letting go and that freedom that letting go provides, when the ego structure up levels a little bit and it starts to come back, you start to avoid it and push against the ego because you're like, no, I don't want this. I don't want this. I've been in bliss mode for 2 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever it is, accepting to whatever is and not having a scorekeeper in the mind. And as the ego kind of comes back online, there's this resistance, this avoidance. Like, I don't want to go back into that. And what you resist persists, right? So the resistance itself is what makes it, the ego structure come back stronger and more kind of acutely, or the sensation that it comes back more acutely.
I've seen this come up with clients and people that have worked with me. It's like some people have this really, really cling to this avoidance and this resistance, and they want so bad to be free of it. But it's like, it's kind of like coupled with like the victim mindset and the suffering, like you were saying. Like, it's like that avoidance must be there for me to suffer. That avoidance must be there for me to stay in the victim, because it's like you're clinging to it in a reverse way.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It does. So ego structures, I don't know how many of them there are. I'm sure there's some, some list out there somewhere of like, these are types of ego structures.
On Pinterest. Pinterest?
Probably Pinterest. Yeah. But just like, you can see like victim's a real big one, right? Like you can see the victim ego on some people. It really shines kind of densely. Eckhart Tolle had his story. Why do bad things always happen to me? That's exactly what he used to tell himself. Why do bad things always happen to me? And it's not uncommon, right? Like, why is this happening today? Why is this happening to me? Why now? Why me? Why me? Why me?
Just like yesterday you said something.
What did I say yesterday?
Why am I always so tired?
Why am I? Oh, I know. I was going through it yesterday. Yeah, for sure. Why am I always so tired? Why me? Why me? I feel great today. But I noticed it when we were coming back from the gym. I was like, oh man, I was really lost in it there for a second. But it's always, the ego structure is for the most part going to be there. I think for some of us, we will get free completely and shut it down completely. But Alan Watts would point out that all we have to do is shut up, but that's shutting up in the mind. And that is not resisting what is. That's not telling a story of what would be better than this current moment. That's not telling yourself that you're the victim because bad things always happen to you. That is simply accepting of where you are at.
Mm-hmm. It's holding on to the identity of that person and that experience.
Yeah, because if you're a victim and you tell the world you're a victim, the world will happily mirror that back to you and treat you like a victim, right? And probably victimize you at the same time, right? Take advantage. There are some, life hack, like mantra is kind of a hack to this, so if you don't have a mantra and you want to feel better, you can wake up every morning and spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes and get your own. You don't have to use some Hindu mantra or something. You don't have to. Like, you can literally wake up in the morning and say, I'm light, I'm love, I'm safe, I'm bliss, I'm free. I just go through and do that for 5 or 10 minutes. And even though it's still egoic in nature, it will help you feel better, right? And so I think there's something to be said for that. If you're in an egoic kind of mindset that makes you feel like shit and you're suffering deeply, well, wouldn't it be great to suffer less? Ultimately, you suffer none at all if you can fully let go. But if you're in a spot where you're not ready to let go like that, or you need to just suffer less, use some mantra. Get up every morning and spend 10 minutes telling yourself you're free, you're whole, you're complete, you're loved, you're worthy. Go through this, and it will eventually, after you do this for 7, 10, 20, 30 days, eventually you will start experiencing this stuff. Something I used to use that was a neat trick was that when I pulled into any parking lot, I would just say that I always get the best parking spot, always. And not that I get the first parking spot nearest the store, but I just get the best parking spot. And so I could always find a reason that the parking spot I got was the best parking spot. And then all of a sudden, I started getting like the front parking spot, like every time. Or if it wasn't the front one, it was like the third one, but that third one was in the shade, right? So you can play these games with the mind. You're still in the ego structure at that point, but you can feel better, and you can you get into a state of less from an avoidance perspective by doing that as well. Because if you can get out of your victim nature, then you will avoid less, right? And be more accepting to what is.
Mm-hmm. And then my perspective of it is like the body, of course, like going in, feeling, experiencing what it's like to be in your body, and then to move from that, because the more that we're avoiding something, the bigger it becomes.
And that tense energy gets trapped in the body, right?
Yeah, if you're not tending to it when it's occurring, experiencing it when it's there and kind of pushing it to the side, avoiding it or whatever, running from it, then it can really start to manifest in the body without you even realizing it.
Mhm.
And then you start to, months later, maybe you start to feel,
Or years.
yeah,
Or
yeah,
years.
days, months, years, however long, however attuned you are to your body, and you start to notice it. And then some people are really tuned in where they have the ability to go back into their body and to feel it, to breathe into it, let it go, whatever method. But sometimes the mind picks up the associated occurrence with it. So like I have a friend who's a good example of this. Our good friend, girlfriend. She is pretty attuned to her body, and when she starts to feel off, depending on her associations of which locations of the body, she can tell specifically what experience that is related to. So for me, I'm not very good at, or I don't have that ability to really sense or relate to the occurrence of the
or to be able
manifestation
to define it like that.
Yeah.
Right.
But, and I don't really want to, in a way.
It's not necessary.
Yeah. So I just get into feeling my body kind of going into that space of like nothingness that we talk about, or just drifting, or really getting into the being. And then I start to feel things go, like I go into like this melty space, and then it's like I just start to feel lighter and lighter and lighter, and then it's gone. It's gone.
And if you're doing it like you're talking about, like noticing that avoidance is part of the patterning, and recognizing that, and doing the work to not avoid as it comes up, right? And then feeling into the body, then there's no more of that created, right? Like there's nothing left to get rid of, right? Like if you feel into and accept deeply where you're at, then there's nothing to get rid of. But for you, when you were going through like your kind of primary awakening vibe, if you will, there was a lot. I mean, I remember even seeing you like do some like ecstatic dance, or like just being on the floor, like doing some kind of floor, and your body would be like gyrating and twisting, and like it looked like something was like, you know, unwinding through you. And it's energetic for sure. But as you get through those phases and you start accepting where you are, it doesn't build up any longer, right? That, because I used to do this too. Like I would let things build up inside of me until I could no longer keep the cork in the bottle, and it would go blowing off the lid. And here comes some outwardly expressive, not good, you know, interpretation of who I think I am and what I deserve. And, you know, really fighting against the world and the people in my life, and telling them, you know, this is how things are going to be or else. And just all these expectations. And it just didn't suit me. It didn't help. It didn't feel good. Right. And so, but we have a tendency in the Western world that, you know, suck it up, buttercup. You know what I'm saying? To not feel, to not express, to not be here now.
Yeah. Especially conditioning through parents.
Oh, parents and teachers, and right. Like coaches, like God, coaches, like for men, it's crazy. Like just, no, don't cry. Don't express. Don't do anything that would let anybody know you're anything other than the strongest human being that's ever lived, that can take on the world all by yourself. It's crazy. Like even in previous relationships, I used to kind of do this as me and you against the world. We saw this on a show we watched the other day, me and you against the world. That's crazy. Like that's a crazy mindset to have. If it's you and I against the world, that's you and I versus roughly 8 billion other people. It's a losing prospect, right? So it's not a fight. It's not a competition. The Tao even talks about this, like, you know, the master has no competitors because the master's not in competition, right? There is no game that I'm trying to win any longer. And I think you're in that space too, right? So there's nothing to avoid. I'm not avoiding loss. I'm not avoiding victory. I'm doing a better job at not labeling what is, because if you don't label it, it's easier to accept as well, right? Because if you label something as good or bad, then it might be harder to accept. Then all of a sudden you wind up in this space where like, I need shadow work to undo 40 years worth of trauma. Not that it's not useful, but
it wants to happen too. Like just earlier when we were recording.
Yeah.
I had said something and you'd like, hey, let's not do that. And I kind of wanted to freeze. Mm-hmm. And I kind of was just like, I wanted to be like, okay, I'm just done. Like, let's just stop.
Right. It's a trigger.
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so in that moment, I was kind of just like, okay.
But were you able to feel through it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It took me like 20 seconds.
Yeah. But that's the difference. And then nothing gets built upon that. Like, we're not going to revisit this 3 months from now. You're not going to be like, hey, remember that one time? And then a whole argument come out of it. And I think that's what we're kind of getting at with this whole podcast, YouTube thing anyway, is there are easier ways to express in the world so that you as an individual don't hold on to all this shit that kind of blows up and you go off on the world and cause bad scenarios for yourself. But you can also do it in relationship. And if you can be very present with what's going on, right, with the experience that is here now, with what's happening in the body, and feel it deeply and be like, oh, wow, this feels strange, or this doesn't feel good, but not push it away. Don't avoid the experience of emotions.
Sensorial consciousness.
Sensorial consciousness. Yeah, that's a mouthful. But yeah, it's
sensorially conscious.
Sensorially conscious? Something. I don't know. Now we're just off on a tangent.
All right.
But there's ways that you can be here now fully, and you can experience right now fully, and your expression will be free from these kind of knots that generally build in the body through the resistance and the avoidance to begin with. And at a certain point, there's nothing left to unravel, because if you are fully experiencing where you are now at every moment that you can, you'll get better and better at seeing and observing and being from a space of awareness. Therefore, nothing attaches to you. You stop carrying around a past that informs your now, right? And likewise, you stop projecting a future that's not here now. Mm-hmm. And so you just become more and more free as you continue to walk the walk. But you don't avoid what's at hand, right? You face it directly, and you do your best to stay fully conscious through that. And if it does slip, you don't beat yourself up, because that's not useful either. You have to be gentle with yourself. The awakening path is beautiful, but it's also really challenging. I work with a lot of people in a one-on-one scenario too, and I have somebody I'm working with right now who's experiencing the kind of mystical, psychedelic, strange parts of awakening. And, these are real too, and also something not to avoid, right? Lean into them deeply, but don't get caught in them. I think it's either the Buddhists or the Hindus call it siddhis, Siddhi, I think it is. Not cities like SITIES, but these are these are kind of phases on the path where you seem to get like psychedelic powers, and you have all these like gifts, as one might say, and they're really neat. But sometimes they turn on and stay on. Sometimes they turn on and turn off. Sometimes they come back. Sometimes they don't. But it's also something not to avoid. I want to put that out there, because if you're really leaning into your awakening deeply, and you are letting go, and you are experiencing beingness, there's a good chance that you'll also experience some of these otherworldly type of scenarios. And I would say be open to those as well, with love in your heart, in the same way you would be accepting of whatever situation that's at hand in the 3D world. I would also be, in a position of not avoiding those as well. Some of them might be kind of weird, but just don't avoid them,
So, sorry.
Please go on.
So let's talk about like what does it mean to not avoid? Because it's kind of like the same thing as like letting go. Like what does that actually mean? Like to people that don't know, haven't, until you experience it, you really don't know. So how can we explain what it is that we're talking about it? Like, of course, not avoiding, like not running or pushing things away, like fully being in the experience of what is, but at what level? How can we do that? At what level?
Well, I think it starts with like all things on this path, is how present can you be, right? How much can you be here now? Even like, because you can feel resistance, like you can feel it. You can feel it coming up. Like it's most of the time it'll manifest as an, I don't want this, right? I don't want this argument. I don't want this scenario.
This isn't my thing.
This isn't your thing.
This isn't my thing. That's what I say.
This isn't my thing.
This isn't my thing.
Right. So whatever this is or isn't, right? It's avoidance, right? I don't want this, right? And so like, this is what I try to tell people that I'm working with. Use these things as red flags, right? Like sit with it for a little bit in the morning, like just to tell yourself like, okay, if I start resisting today, what is my, because everybody's resistance is a little bit different, like how they categorize it, like you, right? This isn't my thing, right? Mine is I don't want this. But if you wake up in the morning and you're like, okay, if I experience this isn't my thing today, that's my cue to open more deeply into that experience.
And also at the same time, letting go of the attachment of what is my thing.
Right. Well, either way, you're resisting, right? So if you say, I want this scenario, you're resisting all other scenarios that are not this, right? If you say, I don't want this scenario, you're resisting that scenario and only accepting to all other scenarios. So it's still pushing away, regardless of which way you choose to do it in your mind. One is kind of a negative aspect, negative approach, and one's a positive approach. I want this or I don't want this, but they're both resisting the opposite of that, right? Whatever that is. And so you can really use these things effectively to help you awaken, right? As if I experience this isn't my thing, I'm going to use that as a cue to open more deeply and be more accepting to the situation and to see what happens if I don't resist it, right? If I don't run away from the situation, or if I don't push away the other person, or if I don't label the situation as bad, right? If I stop resisting and just become very present with myself in that moment, feel what's going on in the body without attaching to it, feel the thought processes and the patterns unfolding without getting lost in the story. How can I use that to my advantage? How can that help me awaken more deeply? And essentially what it boils down to is self-inquiry, right? Like, who am I really? You know, if I'm not these patterns, I'm not these emotions, I'm not this body, then who am I really? But you can use avoidance as a doorway in, how to help you get there by recognizing what you avoid, where you hold your breath, where you tense up, and trying to relax into that more, right? Use those as red flags during your day. I think it's useful.
It's kind of makes me think of that probably like almost a year ago now, and you were at my house one day and we were talking about doing things that we wouldn't normally do. This is kind of more like surface level, but doing things that we wouldn't normally do, like going back to like yes. Yeah,
being using yes more.
Yeah.
Right. I remember this conversation. It was great because Brad, the character, has a tendency to know things. Right? Just, hey, do you want to go to the beach? Nah. You know, hey, you want to do this? Nah, I'm good.
I'm going to walk.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I still do that for walks. Yeah, you want to go on a walk? No, not really. But yeah, just being more accepting with a yes in your heart. I'm going to start using that. I think that's great. Yeah, I'm just going to say yes to every walk forever. Just less resistance.
On camera?
Yeah, we're going to take more walks because I'll just say yes to them no matter what.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm all about it because like the more that I kind of went through a period where I did that too, and I love change. Like as much as I love structure and plans and knowing what is going to happen, and it's like being organized, but I also love change and the opposite of it.
Well, that's useful because the thing is, it's like if you've let go completely and you don't care what happens around you, right? Like, I don't care. I don't care if I'm successful. I don't care if I fail. I don't care. It's not that you don't do. It's just that you pour yourself more fully into the action versus the results of the action, right? So if I pour myself into my work, it's not that I'm pouring myself into the result. Is this going to get me more money or a promotion or something or more recognition, right? That's going to make you suffer, because if those expectations aren't met, here comes a lot of suffering. Why didn't I get it? Was it my fault? Did I do something wrong? Was it this person that has pitted themselves against me? Do I now have enemies? That's the world of suffering. But if you pour yourself into your task and you're fully present with the task, regardless of the result, you'll start to set yourself free. So like you're saying, like, it's okay for you for things to work out or not work out, right? Because change for you is okay. It's not, you're not adverse to it, right? You're not pushing away. You're not avoiding the change that is the only constant in the universe, is that all things are changeful.
Yeah. It still definitely hits me at times.
Oh yeah.
Like when it happens, when I have planned something to happen in my head and it doesn't happen that way, and I kind of get all frazzled, like,
but it's just for a second.
Yeah. Just for a second, and then it kind of goes away, and I'm like, oh, this is okay. Because I know that whatever happens is like, and it's even like past experiences of what I have experienced, like completely in every traumatic, dark place, negative, terrible place I've ever been through an experience. Like I have absolutely zero regrets, because every experience, no matter the outcome, is always,
well, it's brought you here.
Yeah.
It's brought you here to this moment. So regardless, we have a good friend, as a matter of fact, that he was literally blown up. Like blown up.
Yeah.
And I love the guy, like he's my brother, and he's had a big awakening over the last year, like a very big one, like really letting go into this moment and having some of the, psychedelic, mystical experiences that come with it. And I asked him recently, as I was looking at some of this memorabilia, if, it, like, how that made him feel. And he's like, oh, totally grateful. He's like, wow, man. He's like, it brought me here. It's a great story, beautiful. Like, and something that would otherwise be detrimental to your day-to-day life, like tragic, like something that yanks you around in the world and makes you feel small or insecure or have post-traumatic stress or all that, that's just gone. It's 100% gone. He's totally free of this stuff. And to see it is absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. But we all have that ability. This isn't special what we talk about. This isn't special for some that work really hard or for others that have experienced more trauma. This is for everyone. Like, you don't have to have a specific religion or dogma or mystical arts or practices. Like, it's already here now. You're already doing it. So just, God, for the love of God, just wake up now. Just do it right now. Set yourself free. Like, it's already here and it's beautiful. It feels different though when you're trapped in an ego suffering. It feels different.
What about the avoidance of awakening?
Good question. This one gets me still to this day. So there is this, for me, I'll explain how it is for me, and then, other people might be able to relate or not. I don't know. But even when we were sitting doing that little like feeling into presence last night, my heart started racing, right? There's this tinge of feel like this, like as this structure starts to approach its grip, just totally, being lost on what it calls reality, there's this like moment, like a drop on a roller coaster, like this. It like almost takes my breath away. It's almost still frightening, right? There's this last tinge of fear from that moment of full release. And sometimes I still don't get through, right? Because Brad is hanging on too tightly. But it's odd because experience is still neutral in the experience of Brad thinking he's holding on tightly, right? Really odd.
I avoid too.
Of course.
Yeah. Like, especially, that's probably like my biggest avoidance actually, is in those moments when things, like for me, it starts to feel like I'm not real anymore.
You're right. Like, this is not real. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's probably like, I guess, a really big fear that comes up for me is not being real, and this not being real. And once this starts to fade into something else, it's just like panic.
Right. Right. Heart starts racing. Right. You're right. Yeah, I agree with you. It's wild, isn't it? because the ego structure makes this real, right? It's the mind is what makes the world because you think you're the center of the universe, just like I think I'm the center of the universe. Like all things come in at me. Light is coming at me. Sound is coming at me. Everything is coming at me, right? But that's not really the case. If a bird chirps outside, it's not chirping at Brad or chirping at Kayla. It's just chirping, and it's going everywhere. And we just happen to be in its path, you know, but we feel like this small, socially sensitive little center, like there's a little driver in there with goggles and headphones, just not. Mm-hmm. But when the sense of this driver with goggles and that sense of a person lets go, it can be very frightening. And so we have this tendency to avoid it, but there's knee-jerk reaction stuff that happens there, stuff that sometimes you have to play around with for a while because it can be so abrupt, right? Like for me that, you know, like it's in my heart starts racing and it feels like I just fell off a building or something. I'm sailing through, you know, open space. It's just very intense. And so sometimes I don't get through it, but I will say this, usually the first thing that I do is like, damn it, you know, I'm like, I was there, you know, and I get a little, but you have to let go of that too. You have to let go of, you can't kick yourself around after that. It's not useful. But I've experienced some of yours where like we've been out in public and you're like, this doesn't feel real, you know, like, but it is true that this is only relatively real. Like this is real. This body's real, relatively real. Like if you drive over it with a car, it will likely die. It's just that the awareness that seems to live inside of you isn't going anywhere. Like it's not going to die. Right? The body will you just won't be speaking through that form anymore. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a walking, talking mouthpiece of the one, you know? And so we fear this thing's death, and it will die. But death implies life. Like we're alive right now, so might as well live it up, baby. Might as well live it up because we are alive, right? And what a blessing, what a beautiful opportunity to be able to experience high highs and low lows and get wrapped up in the game and play it, you know, look for dance partners, have a hell of a dance. It's pretty awesome.
You know, I was about like the high and lows. I was thinking about this the other day where, you know, some like every once in a while we have like an off day between us.
Oh yeah. Oh, I feel it too.
Yeah. But it happened the other day. And I think yesterday I was like, we were in the gym and I was just looking at you and it was like that off period. But then I started thinking about the moments when I look at you and I'm just like, like what?
Yeah.
So it's like, of course, like the same thing with that. Like if we didn't have the high and lows with that, then the highs wouldn't.
Well, there wouldn't be highs anymore, right? Yeah. There wouldn't be highs if there were no lows.
So I will trade in the lows for the highs.
Sure, but you don't even have to trade them. Like you just have to recognize that they're there for the experience itself.
Yeah.
You know, but it does feel like in form, in an ego structure, in your persona, it feels better to have a high than it does a low. But as you walk this walk and you awaken more deeply, I have another client that I work with who is recognizing herself as the space of awareness. And with that comes the fact that almost all of her experiences are now neutral, right? Like the love for her family and her dogs and her rest of her animals and her house and her space in life and her roles is as neutral as like if all of her stuff burned down, right? Like there is, it is an oddity. It is a weird space, you know, to recognize that all things truly are neutral until we vomit meaning all over them. And so it feels a little awkward at first, you know, but then it normalizes and you're like, oh, everything just is, right? There is no label. And then there's nothing left to avoid, right? Because there's not an avoider. There's not somebody in there even doing the avoiding. There just is beingness that doesn't care. It's not trying to get anywhere or trying to learn anything or figure it out. So just don't avoid. Or if actually, I wouldn't say don't avoid because avoidance will be when you
don't avoid avoidance.
Don't avoid avoidance. That's a good one. And It's like desire, get rid of desire, right? Buddha would say, get rid of desire. And then your final thing that you desire to get rid of is desire itself, right? So then you're really playing the game at that point. However, you can use these as markers on your path, right? You can use these to recognize where you're avoiding, where you're clenching,
yes,
where you're holding,
yeah,
and start to relax into that and be accepting of whatever that moment is. Fully accepting, fully embrace it. Love it. Love it all. Love it all. Always
and
tell
be
the truth.
free.
And be free.
Thanks for joining us on Awakening and Relating.
Please like, share, and subscribe.
See you next week.